Bob, I would have done my hair for you, but I don't have any, so I'm sorry about that. It's not very nice.
Say it here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. It's a brand new show, this one. I've had other programs before, but I wanted to set up a new one called Out of Nowhere. Bit extraordinary. Talk about different things: werewolves, paranormal, Bigfoot, aliens, UFOs, paranormal, anything out there. What's interesting to talk about? So I've got a fantastic guest on my show today. His name is Thomas Durant. Thomas is a film and television producer, director, editor with over 18 years of experience in the USA entertainment industry. His credits include its shows such as Deadliest Catch, that's on Discovery Channel, Ice Road Truckers, the History Channel, and Car Trek YouTube. Aside from his career, Tommy has dedicated 20 years of his research and activity investigating a wide range of the paranormal. Can we please welcome Thomas to the show? Hello there.
Hi, everybody.
You know, there's a little bit about yourself and how you got into the paranormal field.
Well, like most people here, and probably where you're at too, I grew up in a house that had activity. So there was ghostly activity happening around the home. And one of the first instances was I was talking to a gentleman that I thought was a real person. Well, it turns out it was my mom's previous husband who had killed himself on the property. And when they told me that, I was really young, so it was hard to comprehend. I'm like, but I see him, but he's there. But I'm talking to somebody who's, I guess, dead. So as I got older, I just was more and more interested in all things weird and arcane and mythological. So that's it. Like I got into the study, I got hooked immediately, and here we are now. I'm 42, and it's been pretty much like the most important part of my life, and it's actually how I even met my wife. So she puts up with all the crazy with me, which is nice.
I like that. You must have experienced some strange, odd stuff on your travels.
Yeah, you would think doing the TV shows I would have more, but really it was doing cases where I would travel out and meet with people that were having experiences, having issues, and we try to sort out what's happening and how to help them kind of get through it or understand it better. But yeah, I'd say like I definitely feel more of my cases on the East Coast of the United States where there's a little bit more history in terms of the Europeans coming over and settling and folks coming down from Canada. That was a lot of fun activity, I would say, but also had some kind of gnarly stuff. And then out west, it really is like you have some influence from the Native American peoples that were killed and moved out of areas. So there's stuff going on there. But then there's such a wide swath of people living in Los Angeles that it's kind of funny, like how many different types of things you can encounter out there that may have come from other places. But then, of course, you've also got, and this is how I got into like the whole UFO thing. It's there's these great, amazing sightings of UFOs all up and down the West Coast, and that just was like another fascinating aspect that I'm like, I got to learn about this now too. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm kind of all over the place, and I do a lot of different things, and I study a lot of different things. But I think that's what's cool for me is it just makes the world a much more magical place. And I think right now, especially, like it's when you find something that's magical and fun and interesting that you could still treat with respect, then why not go for it?
Exactly, yeah. Well, there's Steph in the chat room, Diane, Melvin, Diane, Rebecca, quite a few in the chat room. But
Hi,
don't
everybody.
forget, if you anybody got any questions, put it in capitals, and I will relay it back to Thomas. Then, one of the a lot of people say, "What are ghosts?" Then,
That's a good question, right? And I think it's one of the oldest questions from the Epic of Gilgamesh, talking about ghost all the way till now. Um, I I can only speak from my experiences. Like I have a pretty wide answer, which I think there's activity that's anything from residual, which most people will know what residual hauntings are. It's just sort of like a recording that plays back over and over. And, the ghosts do the same, or the spirits do the same thing over and over again, but they don't really interact with us. They don't really have any consciousness that we can attest to. So I think that's a part of it. But then there's also these great experiences we have where we'll have entities call our name out either audibly or on our recording devices. And that's likely not just something that's a playback of history. That seems like something that's got a consciousness to it. So I kind of feel like there's a wide swath of everything from people that are dead and may not know it and are still somehow interacting with us to, maybe we're kind of getting a glimpse of somebody who passed away that has come back from whatever alternate reality we go to or spiritual reality we go to after, to deliver messages to us to help us like live better lives or to be safe in certain situations. So it's just depends. Like and it's all just my experiences. Like I said, everybody's got their own, and some people don't even believe in ghosts. So take that for what it's worth.
When you go to an haunting or anything like that, what tools do you use when you go to a place like that?
For me, I think the biggest tool, and this is going to sound terrible, is us. Like, I don't like to often call people tools, but in this sense, it actually is pretty accurate. I think our bodies have a way of being able to tune into these things and to react. So whether that's the hair standing up, whether that's a feeling in your stomach, whether that's a tingling sensation on the top of your head, like we're a really good barometer for this stuff. Most people can walk into a place and they get a vibe or some
Yeah.
sort of feeling. And I really think that's like our key to all this is understanding that the tools, much like in occultism, you have all these ritual tools, but it's really the work you're doing that's creating the magic, right? So the same thing with this is I can bring recorders and video cameras, and I do love like full spectrum video cameras. I think are great. I think having a really solid audio recorder like a Zoom H6 or H4 is a great tool. And if you want to play back in person, that's awesome. We've had good luck with ion counters as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's kind of an experiential thing. So being present for those experiences as a person and feeling how your body interacts and reacts to these things, I think is always going to be your best device, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you there as well. Um, I've been exactly what were you saying? You're going to a place, you can feel either the cold shiver going into a room, you think there's going to be something here. I can feel it. It's gone so cold. And then you could move, I don't know, 10 paces that to the left, and there's nothing. So you're in the right path. And you might find something might just appear. You never know. Because, Rebecca's got a question here for you.
Sure.
Hi, Thomas. What other paranormal experiences have you had? UFO, FAE, Bigfoot, etc.
Oh, the Fae. We actually, I had a team of people in the United States that we had a case where, in the end, we end up determining that it was likely Fae folk. The family in question was from the UK, and they did bring some stuff with them, we believe. But it was fascinating because we just couldn't figure out this activity. It was one of my buddies, Dave Harvey, was one of the investigators with me. He's a historian and works with a lot of museums in terms of like
Yeah.
helping them restore artifacts. So we were trying to figure out like what's happening here and where can we find this in history, because a lot of our diagnosis on what's going on is by relating what is happening now to what we can find in historic texts. And the weird thing was like we were getting these weird little pinpricks all over us, and it felt like someone was, I don't want to say pinching, but more like poking with a needle. He actually felt like something bit him, but something small, and there were red
Oh,
marks left
right.
over. There was a lot of like weird laughter we were catching on the recordings, and they had no children in the house, so that was strange. So we started reading. It was a book called "The Secret Commonwealths of Elves, Fairies." Oh God, what is it? I forget the whole title, but Secret Commonwealth of Elves, essentially. And it was from a priest from your area, I think back
Yeah.
in, I want to say the 1800s, but it may have been prior to that. And he wrote all about the Fey folk and Elfenblau, the pinpricks. It was exactly like what we were feeling, and all of the activity, all of the strangeness. So we started using elements that we thought would be helpful, like cold iron, and actually one of the weird things is bellows. Like we brought in a set of bellows because we read that in another previous text, and we blew cedar smoke through the bellows, and that seemed to actually calm everything down for a while. So that's an experience where I thought, okay, here's something that I didn't even think existed, and yet we were able to take the activity and then trace it back to these old texts. And in an area that you wouldn't think you'd have that kind of activity, here we are and dealing with it in a way that they probably were back then. So it's kind of a fascinating trek through history too.
Do you think people get attachments as well?
Yeah. And I think that's what the case was with that family in particular. But yeah, for sure. I do believe heavily in attachments. Actually, the place I met my wife through was a place called Wolf Manor, which no longer exists. It's in California, and it got bulldozed, thankfully, because for a while there was like a 3 or 4 year period where almost all of my cases were people who had gone in there, come home, and were having activity follow them home. So everybody was handing out my number to like, hey, have Tom come help you deal with this. And I'm like, stop going there. Why are you going in there if everyone's having the same problem? And it was a lot of people over the course of several years. And, again, it's like one of those things where if you don't experience it, you may not believe it. But that place
Correct.
definitely had a vibe to it. And it definitely had a lot of crazy activity that I would consider very malevolent and dark. So I have no love lost that it got bulldozed.
Brilliant. There must be loads. There must be a lot of activity around Native Americans.
Yeah, a lot of sites. We found that it was a mixture, at least back east specifically, there was a mixture of activity in areas that were high up on mountaintops or near water, which obviously would have been considered for settlements or sacred lands. But there's a lot of like mystique around the swamps as well, with things like puckwudgies or willow wisps, things of that nature, which tended to be in those lands and draw people out and kill them. But on the West Coast, we found a lot of the missions where they would come in and basically the Spaniards would kill or convert the Native American folk and then force them into slavery. And those places were off the chain. Like we had a place in Lompoc, there was a mission there that was very haunted, had a lot of crazy activity. And so we had a great time going back with our friends who were from the Chumash tribe of Native Americans or First Nations people, and they would try to interact because their people would have been some of the people brought in there. And it led to some really interesting, like, kind of moments of you feel very oppressed until our friend would start speaking in the traditional language and it would calm down and you could feel the change of the room with your body because again we're the best tool, right? So yeah, it was pretty crazy. There's a lot of that here, but you guys have such a rich history where you're at. I can't imagine how haunted it is where you are.
Oh, it is, yeah. Did they, you talk about Native, did they ever talk about skinwalkers?
Not specifically. We up in the north, there's a lot of talk about the basket woman, which kind of almost reminds me of Krampus in a way. Of it's a native being that would have a basket where they could basically steal children and do harm. But skinwalkers, I haven't personally had a lot of run in with that, thankfully, because that sounds terrifying. Although I do secretly want to go to Skinwalker Ranch like everybody else, but I probably
Yeah,
won't.
we all do. We all do.
I want to go for the UFO activity though. I'm more fascinated with that there.
Yeah, exactly. This is from Soper Carper. Tom, do you believe malevolent spirits are who they portray themselves, i.e., family members, etc.?
So we've actually talked about this on the channel that I run with my friend Car Wizard David Long, who's a devout Christian. Our debate is this. I think that maybe not all of them, but I do think most of them are benevolent and want to be helpful because of the messages we get. There's no like weird aha moment or some sort of backstabbing or anything that happens with a lot of my cases. So if it portrays itself that way, I think it's generally for me has turned out to be that way. I also test it out by like, and this is going to sound probably really woo woo to some people, so I warn you right now with my woo woo meter all the way up. A lot of times when I'm interacting with beings, I'm trying to again use my body as a barometer, and I say, well, help me feel love. I want to feel love, and there's definitely a difference between what some energies will purvey as love to what other energies will purvey as love. And the feeling of love is different. And so that's a good way for me to kind of discern in the moment whether something's being truthful or not. But we also spend a lot of time going back to these homes several times and asking questions and trying to ask like a psychology test. We're going to ask the same question 8 times in 8 different ways and see if we get different answers or the same answer. So there is a vetting process that goes on for quite a while, and I do believe in the use of mediums and psychics at times. So sometimes they're brought in. I think we all have a little bit of it, but some people spend a lot more time flexing those muscles. So it's like, well, get them in and have them, see if they can determine what's what. But if it's not harming the family and it's not doing damage, it's hard for me to believe that it's a malevolent spirit.
I think we all ought to work together, psychic mediums, paranormal, and people who work with UFOs. I think they're all similar in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And we all ought to work together.
Yep. There's been a lot of talk about unity in the paranormal, but it just, much like the media, everything gets divided. So I think it's important for everyone to have these conversations with each other and really try to learn from one another. And yeah, you may not believe everything I say. I may not believe everything you say, but there's nuggets of truth in all of it. And I think that's the beauty of this world is it's not just science that's going to prove this, because you can have a picture of a ghost and because of AI, no one's going to believe it anyway. So it's really a personal journey, but it's our interpersonal relationships that build that.
Do you ever come across shadows then, shadow people?
Yeah, that was for a long time. I spent a lot of time studying that phenomenon. I think there's definitely categories in my mind. I like to call it like an ecosystem of it because it's. I don't think it's all the same thing. I think sometimes you're dealing with what people would consider demonic or malevolent spirits. I think sometimes people are dealing with ghosts that are just manifesting by somehow absorbing the photonic energy in the area. But then I also think there's a individual group of entities that I would more equate with like the angelic watchers in a way, because it seems like they're much more they're not about interacting, they're much more about observing other things. And I got so many reports from people where other activity was happening, whether it was alien abductions or it was demonic or ghostly interference, and then this other figure just kind of off in the wings watching everything. So I found that fascinating, and that tends to be like my go-to for, okay, let's determine what are these factors in this activity that somebody's experiencing, and then how does it play a part. So like at Waverly Hills Sanatorium, which is a notorious haunt here in Louisville, Kentucky, we saw a lot of shadowy figures walking around, and we've gotten photographs of that. Do I think those are, shadow people? I mean, maybe not the watcher type, but certainly it's how these entities are manifesting. Have I seen demonic entities manifest in a way that is very shadowy, but still has a form to it? Absolutely. And that's terrifying, but I don't think those are all shadow people. So I like to really be careful with how I classify things, because I think that's, for me, a big point of contention is it's easy to just lump stuff together. And I do think there's a relation to a lot of it, but I don't want to just say everything's a blanket demon, everything's a blanket ghost, everything's a blanket UFO alien encounter, because I think that's too simplistic for my tastes.
Have you had any, has it ever been occurred to you where very demonic voices coming through?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. we got a recording one time. We were doing a case in California, and it came back in it was what's the name of that language? It's an old dialect of Hindi, and it said priestly Latin does not work. I had to send it out to get translated. So that was a
Yeah,
fun one. Uh, it's like I've had that. I've had Aramaic on my recorders before, and there's not a lot of people that speak that. So, especially in Reno, Nevada, of all places. So I don't know where else that would have come from. So we've had,
exactly.
yeah, Reno's kind of a creepy place, honestly.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Have you ever been scratched or touched in any
Yep.
places you've been?
Yeah. I've been fairly lucky. I've only had the scratches happen a couple of times, but I've been on cases where, I mean, one of the fellow investigators I was working with on one case, I actually saw him get shoved, and he was like a 370-pound guy,
My
just got
God.
shoved out of nowhere. He had scratches all up and down his back too. Like I said, Dave Harvey, who was on that other case, he got bit by something, and we're like, well, that's not. We'll have to be more careful on this one. But I've had scratches. The weird part about the scratching is what most people don't realize. It's not like somebody or a cat scratches you. It for me, it was like a burning sensation, and then it welted up, and then it kind of split open almost from the inside. And
Oh my God.
that was a moment. That was a moment. But I try to have a lot of reverence and respect for the energies that I'm dealing with, but I try not to allow fear to creep in, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. But you must always protect yourself when you go into a place like that.
And I think that's why I've had minimal effects. I've felt things touch me. I felt this, obviously I had the scratching a couple times, but I've been, I would say, incredibly blessed and lucky. But I also am very rigorous about my spiritual protection and the protocols in place that I do before going on cases, which involve everything from like my diet to my supplements to actual, spiritual practices that I have. So I take a much more holistic approach to it before going into a space.
Yeah, I should do as well, I've heard of people being um, attacked, and scratched, really scratched on the back.
Yeah.
And even one, it looked like a knife cut down his front of his
Yep.
chest.
Yep. And usually it happens to the people that are the most brazen and have the most hubris, though. So, like the larger gentleman who got pushed and scratched, that was his thing. Is he was attempting to pick a fight, and I'm like, well, what are you gonna do? Who are you gonna punch, dude? Like, what are you doing? Look, that's not how this works. You're in their world, You can't fight them in their world like that. So I always like to take the approach of I'm kind of like a polytheist in some sense. Like generally, I just call myself a spiritual occultist because that's probably the best way. But I look at different traditions, I look at different beliefs, I research them, and I take what works for me, and I apply those principles. And most of those principles are appealing to beings on the other side that are of more positive light or more loving or more nurturing to
Mm.
humanity, and that's my protection. Like I know that I am a I am a person swimming in an ocean of sharks. So I don't pretend I'm going to be able to go beat up all the sharks. What I hope is that there's a bigger shark or a whale somewhere nearby that's going to deter the sharks from coming after me. And knock on wood, that's worked for me pretty well.
Good. Question from Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
What's your theory on orbs or intelligent light forms that appear to interact with people? Thanks, Thomas.
I definitely believe that they interact with us. I mean, that's again, if you look at the history, it's very clear since the Epic of Gilgamesh that these beings have been interacting with us. So I 100% believe that there is interaction. Whether that's good or bad, I think depends on honestly a multitude of factors. So it could be just that you caught this entity at the wrong day and it doesn't like us, or maybe they've never liked us, or maybe it's one that feels, love towards us or compassion and understands like, hey, You guys are like kids, and we're trying to help you get to where you need to be eventually, but it's going to be a process. So I definitely believe that there's all sorts of interaction because too many people have had experiences. There's just too many people on this planet that have had interactions for it to not be that. Orbs is another thing, though. It's hard for me to always say orbs are real because a lot of it is photographic evidence, and being somebody who works with cameras every day, I know that there's things that happen with light and different spectrums of light and how it interacts with different sensors or the cameras or the medium that you're recording to. So that I have a harder time with, but I'm not here to burst anyone's bubble. Like if you believe in orbs and you think they're delivering good positive messages, then take those messages, take the positivity and spread. If it's a good message, spread it to the people that need it because there's nothing wrong with that.
You know, when you've been talking about the paranormal and everything, does that run in your family then? What about your parents or your grandma?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. So, my great grandmother from Greece, they came from the Peloponnese Islands. She was kind of known as I guess, fortune teller, for lack of a better term, because it was kind of gypsy esque. But she would like do a lot of tea leaf reading, and she used a lot of folk magic to help people with curses and such. So, I mean, I don't know if it was real. I never got to meet her, and I only know the stories from my mom because my grandmother passed before I was old enough to talk to her. So it's hard for me to know, but I think there's probably some sort of family history of it because here I am doing this and hearing that my great grandmother was also involved. Like there's probably something to that lineage, but I don't know. I don't put a lot of stock in it. I just try to follow where I'm guided to go, and so here we are.
When we talk about UFOs, what do you think they are?
I think there's a mixture of things. I kind of subscribe to the Richard Dolan idea, which is there's probably some from space, there's probably some from other dimensions, there may even be some that come from inner Earth. The thing is, we just don't know, and there's just so many sightings and so many varied sightings of different craft, different beings that I have a feeling it's probably all over the place.
Yeah, have you had a sighting yourself?
Yeah, I had one as a kid, and it was pretty funny because I had my buddy staying over. Like I want to say we were like 11, 12. So he was much more adventurous. I was a scaredy cat kind of a kid, which is weird because I got into the field of like demonology. So kind of strange. But as a scaredy cat kid, my buddy's like, hey, let's go outside. Let's hang out there, watch the stars. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, there's bears out here because like we lived out in the country. So you have a lot
Excuse me.
of bears and bobcats and things. So I was just like more worried that we were going to get eaten. But we saw a light out in the swamp, and I was like, oh, that's weird because there's no cars out there, but it looked like it could have been a car light. So my buddy had the smart idea to take the flashlight and start flashing it. And he did. And then it flashed back, and then he did it again. And I'm like, there must be somebody out there, but it was kind of high up in the swamp, so I wasn't 100% sure. But then I got nervous. I went up to the porch, and he followed me, and he kept flashing at it. And then we saw a ring of red lights appear right at the end of the driveway of our house, which was probably about, I want to say about 100 yards or so, probably like anywhere between 75 and 100 yards away. And it was right above the tree line. So that freaked me out. I ran inside and locked the door behind because I just was not having any of that. But it was weird because the next day we went out to see where it had shown up, and you could see the branches of the trees in that area, like almost in a perfect circle, were burnt off, and there were like burnt embers down below. So whatever was there seemed to have had some heat behind it. And yeah, I'll never forget that. It was a really interesting moment. But then I put UFOs out of my mind for the most part for a while, and it wasn't until I moved to California and then eventually to Washington State where I was like, oh, I really want to get involved and join MUFON and see about like how do we understand this better.
I know with you being a cameraman, you must look at some of these photos of UFOs and think, are they real or are they doing something with them, with the photos.
Well, I also worked in visual effects for a while. So the nice part is I can look at an image with a very keen eye, and I'm pretty accurate, not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty accurate knowing whether something is or is not digitally manipulated. I mean, we can look at the metadata, but metadata can also be fabricated. So it's really about looking at the different channels of light going through the red, the green, and the blue channels, and seeing if there's artifacting that we can determine, okay, this is obviously created digitally and was photoshopped in, or was, an AI image that was superimposed over this. The AI stuff is a lot harder to determine if it's done right. And unfortunately, like as that technology gets better, it's going to be harder and harder. But you go on that, you go on the eyewitness testimony. But we also had people that tried to pass off like flying a drone over a house, and they were saying, "Oh my God, look at the UFO!" And you hear the drone and you see the flashing lights. You're like, obviously, this is not real. You're hoaxing us.
Do you get a lot of people sending you films then?
I you would think, but no, it's not that common. I mean, MUFON has their Mutual UFO Network. MUFON has their own like sort of higher end or more, I would say, their go-to people for it that have been in the organization for a while. I just was happening to get cases that would come into Washington. But in terms of like the ghost activity, people have always sent me videos and photos and asked my opinion. It's just not as common these days for whatever reason. But I think people know I'm busy. But I always try to make time for it because this stuff's fun.
Oh God, oh yeah. Steph's got a question here, I think. Something totally different. What's your opinion of crop circles, etc.? Are they man-made? I think she's trying to say there.
ET or man-made, huh? So funny enough, my wife and I were at a party at a friend's house in California, and he is a professional crop circle maker. For for whatever reason, people will hire people to come out and make crop circles. And so, like, he and his team would design them and then go out and do them. That being said, I don't think they're all man-made. I think there's enough ufologists that have gone out and studied the interesting gravitational, electromagnetic, magnetic the discrepancies, blah, in these legitimate, what I'll call legitimate crop circles. So I do think there's something to it. I do believe that there are some that are not made by us, but like anything else, it gets co-opted by capitalism, and people go in there and, hey, if you wanna have us do a crop circle, we'll do a crop circle for you, and then if you want some media attention for it, we'll call the media and let them know for you. And it's unfortunate that that's how it goes with some people, because it only takes away from what I would call the real phenomenon. But you have it with anyone. Like, you have people that claim their house is haunted just to get on TV or have ghost hunters come out.
Oh, of course they will. Wherever.
Mm-hmm.
What's the, in America, what's the biggest haunting house you've ever done then?
So we investigated the Stanley Hotel, which is pretty massive. We investigated Waverly Hills, which is pretty massive. But I would say that like the private residence cases, even though they're a much smaller location and they're not open to the public, I've had some of the more interesting phenomenon happen at those. But aside from that, I'd say that Wolf Manor place in California that no longer exists was probably in my top 5 most haunted places I've ever been.
Well, was it the scariest you'd ever been?
No, no, no. That would be a private residence in, well, two. There was a private residence in a place called Raymond, California, and then a private residence in Kingston, Rhode Island. Those are my two scariest, I think.
And what happened there then?
Well, Rhode Island was it was my first. I'll call it my first non-human malevolent case. A buddy of mine, I was in college and I was, going out just investigating haunted houses and ghosts and things. So I was like, oh, what are you up to? And he's like, well, I've got some Satanist friends that did a conjuring ritual that went bad. So they've got something going on at their house. Do you want to come out? And I'm like, I guess. So I get in the car with him and we go out. And the first thing that happens, and it's hard for me because it's like nobody will believe you when you say these things. And I wouldn't have believed anyone if they told me this, but I was there. So I have to believe it, you know. But we walked in and it literally looked like one of the walls, about probably about a 7 foot ceiling, 6 foot ceiling, not 7 foot because we were about 6 feet. So it would have been 7 feet ceiling. The whole wall bulged out and it looked like it was a face. And the lights started flickering in the house. And I just looked at my buddy Anthony. I'm like, what the did you get me into? And he's like, just ignore it. I'm like, how the do you ignore this? Like I started freaking out and he's like, get your composure. Let's sit down and talk to him. So we sat and we talked with the Satanists there and understood what they were doing, found out more about the ritual that they were doing and why they did it, and the fact that they never closed out the ritual, which was the problem. So if you're a ritual magician, make sure you close your rituals. That's like a blanket statement now from here on out for me. Always finish what you start because you don't want to leave any doors open, and they definitely did.
Exactly.
And this was an interesting case because we get in. So I had learned early on that using UV light bulbs was a way to deter the activity. It seems like it disrupts their ability to manifest for most things. So I had put in some UV light bulbs in the room and we turned them on. And like no sooner do we get them all on and get the lights off, then we all see this shadow that's just swirling around the room. And it's like thick as mud. So again, my first time dealing with something this serious, I was freaking out, but I was trying to keep myself together. And you could see it go to one of the lights. The light bulbs literally popped and just blew out, all of them. So then we're just lighting candles so we can see in the room. And one of the women there, it went through her and then she dropped like a sack of potatoes. And that's the first time I'd ever seen that. I've seen that only one or two other times since. So it was a very involved, long night of rituals to try to close the door and what these people had done. And yeah, I'll never forget that night. But it also is what got me into the position where I'm like, if I can handle this, I think I can handle most cases because 90% of cases are not like this. So that was kind of my first foray into that. And it got me on that path to learn more about these non-human forces and how to help people out.
Yeah, another thing that people don't realize about Ouija boards. If you open one up, you should shut them down because you never
That's the
know
same.
what's going to come out.
Well, even EVP sessions in a way, because EVP sessions, you're inviting, you're giving invitation, which is in the demonic world, that's like the first step of leading towards oppression and possession. So even with EVP sessions, I always close out my sessions. I always say, "Thank you. We're stopping recording. We're ending this." I disconnect myself. I have all these like protocols that I use there to ensure that I'm closing the ritual, so to speak. But everyone's going to do what they're going to do.
Have you ever been? I know we talked previously about Skinwalker Ranch and things like that. Have you ever been on a Bigfoot hunt or anything like that?
I've been trying to go squatching for a while. I can't find all the people and the time to do it at the same time. I had one encounter with what I think was a skunk ape down in Florida, but that was going. We were looking at colleges down there, a buddy of mine and I, and his dad was driving, and it was probably about like 1 a.m. because we were driving all over Kingdom Come because they wanted to stay at a family place, so we had to drive like hours to get anywhere. So we're driving in the middle of the night on a straight road in between two bayous, and this thing crossed the road on all four legs, but it had like long golden hair, and I thought that was interesting. It's like if a golden retriever had been overgrown, both their hair and they were like 5 times the size, because it would have been about the size of like a grizzly bear, I would say, a small grizzly bear, but the hair was super long. So my buddy's dad sees it, I see it, and he guns it, drives another couple miles down the road, gets out, and then decides to pour buckets of water on his head because he's like freaking out thinking he's hallucinating. And I'm like, no, I saw it too. I saw it too. What was that? And so later it's like I was looking and it's like that area has so many skunk ape sightings that I'm like, maybe, but maybe it was a bear. Like maybe it was just a really hairy bear that was in Florida in the bayous. It's possible, but I'm leaning more towards the idea that it was a skunk ape.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it. Have you
Yeah.
ever, what about dogmen? Have you had any encounters with dogmen?
Ooh, luckily no. That one scares me because the encounters range from people being stalked to seeing them smoking cigarettes standing there watching you. It's like it's really weird. And I one of my dreams, and this is a weird dream to have, and I'm sorry about this, but like one of my dreams is to go to Louisiana and go on the hunt for Dogman or the Rougarou or Loop Guru, depending on how
Oh,
you
yeah,
pronounce it.
Rougarou.
Like I would love to go on a Rougarou hunt because that's like to me just super fascinating, terrifying but fascinating. Luckily, most of the people there are good old boys, so I'm sure there's going to be plenty of firearms for protection if that helps any. But if it's the spiritual protection that keeps us safe, then I'll leave that to me. But I really want to go do that because it's a fascinating creature. It's a fascinating history, and it's got elements of Dogman, it's got elements of Bigfoot, it's got a lot of different things to it. So it's almost like the Jersey Devil of the South.
Well, a good friend of mine, Paul Sinclair, you probably don't know him, has just released a documentary called Wolfland,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's about werewolf sightings on the northeast coast where I live. Paul lives in the bottom flat where I live. It's his property. I've got the top flat. Somebody's in the middle flat and Paul's in the bottom. So we go out together. I haven't been out for a while because my hips are quite bad, but there's been quite a few sightings, of werewolf sightings, in the last 10 years, about 7 or 8 sightings of werewolves, right up until 2019, 2020.
Whoa, that
Recent
recent.
sightings. Yes, yeah, yeah,
Whoa.
yeah. So if you ever get chance, have a look at I think it's on Amazon Prime,
Okay.
Wolfland.
Yeah, I'm 100%
See
gonna
what you
watch
think
it.
about it, and
Now I
and
want to
and
come
if
out to
you
you guys and go hunting with you.
and write a review for Paul as well. He'd love that. See what you think about it. It's a very good documentary on limited funds.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
You know,
But
he's
that's
got.
how people are
I'm
getting
not saying basics. He's
well, people are getting like it's funny because like anyone can do a documentary, but I love it because you get really good information that way because the boots on the ground I think is where a lot of the research is. And the fact that you all are out there doing it is
that's what
amazing.
Paul. That's Paul. He's a good boots on ground bloke. If anybody's had a site and said, right, I'll come and visit you tomorrow. Is that okay? Do you mind if I film? Do you mind if I film you doing, talking about it? No, 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 no problem. There's been some sightings where people don't know each other, and it
Hmm.
might have been 6 months from that sighting to another sighting,
Hmm.
and I've been there when he's interviewed people, and I thought, my God, you come for a holiday, walk on top of cliffs, and see something. They passed this thing once and said, I thought it was a statue. And then when they came back, it had said it moved. And they watched it both going outside at the cliff. And then it just vanished.
Yep. It's amazing the speed that they have and the strength. Like the cases in America of dogmen or werewolves, the fact that it's literally able, just like a Sasquatch, to rip prey apart. People see goats and other animals just completely dismembered just by being pulled apart. It's terrifying, but it's again super fascinating because how are these entities getting around without being seen? Is it a cryptozoological animal that has some sort of small breeding population, or is this some sort of spiritual being that can physically manifest for periods of time? Like that's to me super fascinating.
And recently, we've had sightings of a black panther. Well, we don't
Mm.
have animals like that around. And
Well, careful.
recently, in the last 6 months, there's been about four sightings.
Wow.
What do they live off? How come they can be here and then vanish for quite
Yep.
a while and then come back again?
Yeah. Well, it's like the people that have those Sasquatch encounters where they follow tracks and the tracks disappear. Like it's, I was with one guy. We actually did go looking for Squatch in Nevada. It was outside of Carson City in some wooded area there. But we were following tracks, and then all of a sudden the tracks just stopped. I'm not 100% convinced they weren't bear tracks, but then why would they just stop? Because it was the same ground, the same weight of the creature. So it looked like the creature just disappeared. Whether it was Bigfoot or something else, that's maybe a UFO abducted the bear. I don't know, but like it was super fascinating to just see that you're following it along, and then all of a sudden there's just no more tracks.
I've heard about that where it's just pixelated and then vanished,
Yeah,
gone.
yeah. They some sort of ability for them to not be seen by our eyes, or like we were saying, traversing reality in some way, going from our dimensions to something else. That's what it's just super fascinating, like that's why I don't just get stuck on one thing in the paranormal, because there's so much out there, there's so much interesting stuff out there, and we keep learning something new every day and seeing something new every day. And how do you not get excited about that?
It's like fine tuning a radio
Hmm.
frequency where I could be stood here watching something, somebody outside of me, I can see, but they can't. Does that mean to say we are chosen sometimes to see things, but the other people can't?
Yeah, that's also possible. And maybe that's going back to family lines of psychic ability.
Yeah, I think so as well. It runs in my family. My great great grandma, she used to read tea leaves.
So same as me. That's great.
Yeah, she used to read tea leaves. And it's passed down the family. Sometimes you get a break in it and then it starts again.
Yep.
And it's strange
Yeah.
where sometimes you think, I want to tell so and so about something. And you tell them, you say, how did you know that? And when you look at it, you think, how does it happen like that? And where does it come from?
Hmm.
You talk about Tesla and all that. He got downloads from
Yeah.
where did he get it from? Whether from space or from somewhere else, but he could make things up in no time.
Yeah. Well, and then you have like the American sleeping prophet Edgar Casey, same thing, who he would just go to sleep and then boom, all of a sudden filled with medical knowledge that he shouldn't have any right to have because he wasn't educated. Or he would be able to tell oil barons where to go dig for oil so that they'd strike wells. And of course, that worked. And then they kept using him for it. I mean, the guy was booked out so far in advance that it put him into almost a nervous breakdown and kind of destroyed his his health. So, I mean, people like him, Nostradamus, another guy that people they'll credit for certain things, but he was a scryer. He would sit with an obsidian mirror and peer into it after doing a very intricate ritual, and the knowledge he got is still being decoded to this day. So there's something to
Definitely. What you got planned for the future for yourself then?
it. Too much. I think mostly right now I'm focusing on this YouTube channel I started with my buddy the Car Wizard, which is called "Can You Believe That?" And we're trying to really like like take the divide of where people are at emotionally these days and find a way to bring people together. So he comes from a very devout Christian perspective. I obviously am more of a spiritual occultist. Usually those two things mix like oil and water, but we try to prove to people that you can have enough common ground and some decency and have these very uh, strict conversations about things that we should never agree on, and find where we do agree and try to at least hear the other person's side. So that has been our our thing that we've started in the last like 2 months, and it's going pretty well, and we're pretty excited. Other than that, like just going to keep making TV and films and media content, and try to eventually like start doing more projects on these things, because I love this topic, and it would be my dream, honestly, would be to just be able to make films about everything from werewolves to UFOs to ghosts, demons, you name it, because there's so much great information out there, and it doesn't necessarily get to the people that need to hear it the most.
How did you get into TV then? How do you become a cameraman?
A lot of student loans. When you have over $100,000 in student debt, you're like, oh, what's going to help me pay that off? So I packed a car and moved across country to Los Angeles, and just tried to get into the film and TV business any way I could. So I started in doing visual effects, and then got out of that very quickly because it was terrible. And then moved into doing editing, and then into camera work. And then now I run and direct shows or content pieces for different clients. So I was actually like one of the head producers on Ice Road Truckers the last year, and a few other shows. So it's been a career of like just finding my way, but it's also been great because I've learned a lot of different parts of the industry, which makes me a much more effective showrunner or director, because I know how these other pieces and parts work. So it's easy for me to bring it together and tell people what I need them to do when we have teams, and get stuff created. And I've also been able to, I've been very fortunate to be able to like amass all the gear I need to make stuff on my own. So we do stuff here and there. And my wife is, God bless her, she puts up with me buying all this shit. Oh, sorry, all this stuff all the time. So, she's been a blessing for sure, and she supports it. So yeah, the goal is eventually to make some enlightening content
But
for
when
people. And
I watched Deadliest Catch, what a when you're watching that, it's good.
yeah, it's
Got
it's all
production
in the
work in
shooting is
that.
great, but it's really in how we like shows like that, and Ice Roads is really how we distill what happens in the field to an essential story. So I did post production exclusively for Catch. It wasn't, I was never on a boat, thankfully. But in that, it's we just take like, here's all the days of stuff. What are the best bits? What are the best pieces? What are the main things that happen throughout an entire fishing season? And how do we tell that story with as much emotion and heart as we can, while also keeping the action alive to keep people engaged. So that's where it's like it was a great learning ground for me, because we just had so much material to pull from to make these stories. And unfortunately, I was on a season when Captain Phil Harris passed away, and one of the things that he did was he wrote on a napkin for our team. He's
Mm.
like, "Tell my story," and so we all got really galvanized to take the arc of the Cornelia Marie and his sons and his legacy, and turn that into a story that was kind of a lesson to everybody. And so I brought that to all of the projects since, of like, how do I bring that heart to everything I do? And again, now for like personal projects, it's been great because I get to do that here too, and share that with everybody. And yeah, I guess be a professional storyteller, which is weird.
It's like when people watch Skinwalker Ranch, people don't realize, but that's over a massive season. It could be a year's work in that, where they're
Yeah.
picking best bits out.
Yep, exactly. It's months of filming, and even with the budgets getting as tight as they are, because budgets have been shrinking universally in these reality shows. But even with that, it's months of filming, months of preparation beyond that. There's obviously stuff that they've captured aside from what's captured during the show, and it's how do you blend that all together to create an interesting story for people. And so I have friends that actually shot on Skinwalker Ranch. And I mean, the radiation thing is real, by the way. There are points where radiation will just randomly hit certain areas of that location, and their meters will go off, because even the camera ops and producers have to wear them. So it's a real thing. Like there's something happening there. I still personally believe that there's some sort of military installation underneath, but I mean, no one's going to ever admit to that. So,
No, no, definitely not. No. You know, like you said, being a cameraman. What if you wanted to start out being a cameraman? What advice would you give somebody early on in his career, going to
mm,
college, going to this, learning?
skip all that. Skip all the college
If
part.
you
Don't
could do
get.
something different,
If I could do it over again, I
if you could do
probably would.
something different,
Yeah, I wouldn't have gone to
if you
college if
could
I
do
could do.
something different, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think the most important thing I can tell anybody who wants to get into film and television is go to where it's being made and meet the people that are making it. You're going to have to pay some dues, and it's going to be a lot of doing cheap or free labor at first. But if you can get enough stuff under your belt, somebody who you grow with, a lot of it is growing with other people. Some of the people you grow with will be able to hire you or give you as a reference for other jobs, and that's how you get jobs in this business. So that's the biggest thing. And the other thing I've learned, and I learned this early on, is nobody is beneath you in that business. I don't care if you're an exec. I'm an executive producer at the company I'm at, but we have production assistants who are like the bottom of the barrel. Never treat the production assistant bad because he may be a network executive one day and you're going to have to work with him and he's only going to remember how you treated him or her. Sorry, not to be gender
Correct.
specific. So him or her. So just always treat people with respect and make those connections and have a real vested interest in how people are doing and what they're doing and not just surface level because that's going to make you stand out from everyone else.
Sounds good. That does absolutely good. That. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Well, you can email me at tommyd@tommyd.com, spelled with one M, as you can see on the stream here. But you can also go to the YouTube channel. Can you believe that? And that you can get in touch with me there because we have a link to get connected. Or I mean, that's pretty much it. I'm not really a social media guy, which is weird because you think I would be, but that's pretty much it. I'm an email. I'm old school. I like email. So email me, tommyd@tommyd.com. I'm happy to talk to you and answer any questions you have.
Well, that'd be absolutely wonderful because I'm sure the people who listen to this later on or during the show, people in chat room might want to ask you some questions about what you do. How did you do that? How did you get into that?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm happy to answer. Like I said, I'm open to everybody. Like I think that that's how we learn, that's how we grow, and I'm sure somebody may have a thought that they want to email me about what their belief is. That may teach me something that I didn't know already. So I try to be very open about all that.
And tell us about your YouTube channel.
So can you believe that started as my friend the Car Wizard, who runs his channel called the Car Wizard. We were doing a car show for Discovery Channel together, and he was our mechanic on the show. And he goes, "I didn't know you were into all the weird stuff." And I go, "Yeah, I'm like the guy who is the weird stuff. Like, come on." And we just started chatting. I told him about some cases I'd done, told him about MUFON, and then he's like, "We should do a channel." So after months of him asking me to do it, we started this channel, and we just put it up. I think October. We started early October, and we now have I think 6 episodes out, and we're putting content out there. It's really for the beginner. It's not for like the paranormal person who's been involved in the industry for like 30 years. It's a way for people who are kind of new to gain some base level information, at least from our experiences. Whether you are a Christian or a non-Christian doesn't matter. Like that's just our perspectives. But we try to give a little bit of everything for everyone because I wanted it to be really attainable and I wanted it to be accessible for anyone who just had a fleeting interest in the paranormal to take a look. So yeah, we've covered UFOs and UAPs. We've covered cryptids very broadly. We've covered poltergeist activity, which is one of my favorite topics that we have,
Mm.
you know, because there's a lot of debate on what that is. And we have our thoughts for sure. And, you know, and then we just let people kind of comment and we ask their questions afterwards because we pre record it. We're not live like this. I'm not tech savvy enough to do the live thing.
Oh,
So I've always done just post production on shows. So that's what I know. So we take questions and we try to ask them at the end of the episodes and let people
yeah,
get their questions in, because I think it's important for everyone to feel heard. But between David and I, we go through all the comments and respond to everybody we can, and I think that's also
brilliant.
important, is to keep engaging.
I know Rebecca just said, love this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Steph just says, thank you, Thomas. Really enjoyed listening tonight. Another great guest, Bob.
Oh,
They
thank you
always
guys.
say
And
that.
thank you for
They
having
always
me
say
on.
I always get best guests on. Well, I try and get the best guests on, and it's good. I love talking to people, and especially talking to you tonight. It's been great.
This has been brilliant. Thank you so much.
And I'll send you the episode anyway.
Yeah, I will make sure it goes
When
up.
I've finished, I'll
I just didn't want my bosses to know I'm taking time off work today to do this. Sorry if you're
I
watching.
like it. I like it.
It's too late
Anyway,
now.
yeah. Thank you to everybody in the chat room. Thank you to Thomas for being a guest on my show. Good night and God bless. Everybody have a good weekend, and I'll see you on the other side.